Would you look at this? The NCAA might have solved the problem before it even happened.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode today is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use that code Locked On College at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year.
All right, welcome in. Good morning. It is July 3rd, day before a big holiday weekend. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. You have found the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Appreciate everyone joining us. Want to start today with an extension of a conversation that we had Wednesday on the pod about the list of designated players that each college football team must submit if it plans in 2025 to carry more than the 105 allowed by the House settlement. So, Got it there? Everybody understand what I'm saying there? These are DSAs, the DSA list, designated student athletes. If you are not good enough to be on the 105 on your team, you're a DSA.
You may be entitled with a tag from your coach. Yeah, good one.
You may be owed a settlement. No, wait, that's
you already are getting a settlement. I don't know. Yeah, it's very odd.
So Nebraska's roster is at 126 players as of July 1st. Huskers could designate as many as 21 who would receive essentially protected status for the remainder of their careers, no matter where they attend college. So we asked the question one day this week, I think it was Wednesday, who should Nebraska designate? Who should Nebraska put on this 21-player list? Players, in theory, who would be cut this year if the roster actually had to be at 105. Should Nebraska just go ahead and put the 21 freshmen who are new to this to the program, 21 true freshmen? I don't think Archie Wilson can count against the 10 can I don't think he's eligible to be a DSA. There's a date. It's April 7th. You had to either be in the program and going through practice or have participated in games or be signed to a letter of intent and be promised
have some paperwork done.
Reps. So sorry, Archie, you're the first player of a new era. It's not possible that you can be a DSA. So should they just put the 21 freshmen there, and then Nebraska could extend this overage on the 105 for as long as possible? Sounds reasonable, right?
Sounds like there would be some people around the country who would absolutely do this. I would say before we get to what the NCAA did here, keep in mind here, we're talking about 105. I mean, Nebraska in the past has had, 130 plus on its roster, but they've had 85 scholarships that they've been dealing with as well. So I think most teams around the country will find that 105 people on your football roster is plenty. So that's something to keep in mind as we talk about this 105 constantly.
So some news on this subject Wednesday, which is why we're talking about it today. Ross Dellinger of ESPN reports that the NCAA Committee on Legislative Relief has issued a waiver to permit athletes whose schools place them on the DSA list to enter the transfer portal from July 5th to July 7th to August 5th.
Nice.
So July 6th, July 6th is the date that these DSA lists have to be submitted. They have to be finalized. That's 1 month after the House settlement was approved. So for the next month after that, 30 days, July 7th to August 5th, hello, transfer portal. If you're a DSA, you can transfer
for free and not count against anybody's roster, which is that's the beauty of the thing. So this has some foresight here by the NCAA. This is a preemptive strike on teams that will simply just designate like we mentioned earlier, 15 freshmen or something like that, just to extend the clock and the period of time in which they could go. Because I think what you'll see is a lot of these guys, I mean, regardless of if they are freshmen or sophomores or how much they've played in the program, I think you'll see them enter the transfer portal, anyway. So there will be this kind of interesting, like, it's almost like in the NFL, there's just kind of a free agent pool of people who are sitting off to the side waiting to get a call. I imagine that's going to happen a little bit starting this weekend.
It creates an interesting situation, and we'll talk in a minute about whether there are going to be players in the portal and what you might expect, who those players in the portal could be. This is basically what the NCAA said to all of these schools as they readied to make their DSA lists. It's like, oh, so you want to put your freshmen or sophomores on this list to keep your roster as large as possible for as long as possible. Fine, but we're going to open the portal to every DSA for 1 month. Oh, and also if they transfer, they won't count against the 105 at their new schools, which makes them more attractive to potential suitors and possibly more valuable in the rev share era. So yes, good job, NCAA. Amazing. Like, you have actually envisioned what might happen. Somebody behind a desk in Indianapolis saw this come across the news when the House settlement terms were approved and said, no. We're not going to deal with another mess here in July. We're going to let those players have a free ticket to go wherever they want if they are classified as DSAs. And so what you'll see now, and what you're going to see at Nebraska as a result of this transfer portal period, is the bottom of the roster get listed as DSAs. At Nebraska, it'll be roughly players 106 through 126. And there may not be 126 in camp, but let's say 123 or something like that. So it'll be
use the designation as it was designed, which you'll have to at this point. And like we said the other day, you don't have to necessarily do the entire difference, right? You don't have to designate the entire difference. You just have to cut them. They just can't be here if you don't designate them. So I'm sure Nebraska probably will have discussions with everyone. Like, hey, everyone who's going to get designated before they get designated probably has already had those discussions. Everybody probably knows who's going to get designated at this point. And you play it close to the vest, and you play it as the rule sort of intended to. And I imagine that'll be the case all around the country. I think it's tough to pull off the shenanigans with the parameters that have been laid out here, which is a good thing.
Absolutely. So maybe there's a debate at Nebraska, like if you've got a player in like the 100 to 105 range, and you're trying to determine if you should designate that player against like somebody in the 106 to 110, like you probably go with the younger guy in that situation. Give yourself an extra year or two of wiggle room with the 105 hard count. But that's about as much shenanigans as I think you'll see, because imagine a coach, like the last thing that any coach wants to do is worry about a key player or prospect, someone who's already in the program, hitting the portal as preseason practice gets underway at the end of this month. Like if you're dealing with enough stuff when July 25th to 27th comes around and these teams are reporting back to, in Lincoln, they're going to report back roughly on Sunday the 27th, which is only 3 weeks from this Sunday, and then practice the next day on the 28th, because they play on August 28th. So you don't want to be thinking about the transfer portal in that time.
No, unnecessary. So that's really interesting, and definitely will cut off a lot of stuff. Now then we get to the question from Nebraska's standpoint, Mitch, like who might be on this list. And I think it would be a bunch of names that you might be familiar with, because a lot of them have been in the program for a couple years and they've played very little football, but they probably are from Nebraska. They're probably the traditional quote unquote walk-ons that are going to continue to get spots in this. This.
And good for them that they're getting relief from the House settlement. I will say this: like, here's a question, and we'll maybe mention a few names from Nebraska before we get done with this conversation. But here's a question: is the portal going to be? Is it going to be a busy month in the portal? First of all, don't expect to see names in the portal that you know.
Yeah, not like big names, right?
No, but I do think that unless the schools have had these conversations and the players fully understand that they're going to be DSA'd. There's a new verb.
Yeah,
you got it's like a
DFA.
That's like in baseball. Yeah, you got DFA'd, designated for assignment. Now you got DSA'd. You're a designated student athlete. If you get crazy. DSA'd on July 6th, that's a shot to the ego, right? Like if you play at a school and you were a recruited student athlete to that school at some point in your career, and you find out that out of 110 players on the roster, you rank 106 through 110. That's kind of a tough thing to get past. And if you didn't know that like weeks or months in advance and you weren't prepared for this moment, do you go in the portal? Yeah, I think you very well might, because you're probably not going to play much at the school that you're attending. But nobody going in the portal or nobody getting DSA'd by Nebraska is receiving rev share dollars. So I doubt that anyone out there in the portal is going to be impacting the 20.5 million, no matter where they go. The 20.5 million that's allowed to be paid to student athletes.
But I will say this: it wouldn't surprise me if a player or two that transferred from like a Power 5 school had an impact at a Group of 5 or an FCS school or something like that. I think a lot of these schools have, they're coming in under 105 already, right? So like, all right, let's take a guy who it just didn't work out at a place like Nebraska or at a place like Ohio State or something like that. We could take him on our roster, no questions asked, and maybe he contributes for us. Now it's a quick turnaround to get there before the season starts, but yeah, I think it also, thins out a little bit or spreads out that kind of wealth of talent too, which is, maybe it doesn't make a big difference right away. But ultimately this is why the settlement exists, or this is part of the reason why the settlement exists. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. I don't know where like Georgia and Alabama are at with their rosters, if they're at 105 or if they're at like 110 to 115. I know those schools have no issue with the 105. Right. And probably won't take much time at all getting there. But if you're like player 106, 107, and you get DSA'd at Georgia, you're exactly right, Connor. You're probably of some value to Middle Tennessee State, or Georgia State. Like that's a good player for those schools.
No doubt about it. All right. When we return, we will have some recruiting news on the 4th of July. We'll talk about that a little bit, where Nebraska stands right now, especially as it pertains to in-state talent, after this.
Right now, a minute to tell you about Monarch Money. Do you ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning for a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, someone who gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money, you see, is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you are also building wealth. If you share finances with someone, Monarch can help you stay on the same page. If you have goals that you want to get serious about, this is the time and the place to do it with Monarch Money. If you want to see all of your accounts in one place, what your spending looks like, download the Monarch Money app. Check it out. Right now, you can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year.
All right, welcome back. We did touch on this a little bit yesterday, but wanted to bring you an update on the Red Panda situation. She, of course, fell off of her unicycle in Minneapolis on Tuesday evening. she was hospitalized, and it turns out that she did break her wrist. She broke her wrist, so she's like my cohort John Bishop in that regard, except for John tripped over a mower bag, and Red Panda fell off of a very tall unicycle. The fall, they did like a whole NTSB report on this. The fall was caused by a faulty left paddle that was damaged during transit. Unbelievable.
That is someone sabotaging Red Panda.
That's what I thought when I saw this. I thought like something is wrong here because that does not happen. She doesn't just fall off her unicycle. That's the easy part.
Okay, there needs to be an investigation here, like immediately. What? First
Agreed.
of all, you said your cohort, John Bishop. I mean, Red Panda is also your cohort.
That's true. We are close personal friends. Yes.
You have thrown her bowls. So
I will say this too. I went back to her locker room because we had to have a pregame meeting basically to figure out what the correct way to throw the bowls was, and I figured it out very quickly. So there was some people that were like by her side throughout this entire time. When she was in Omaha last February, she didn't. I don't think she had anybody with her. Like she was alone. Like there was nobody like helping her out except for the Creighton people and me. So I don't know.
She had a team of like 20 people.
I don't know who Greta and Sheridan are.
Oh, Greta and Sheridan are from the Minnesota Lynx.
Okay, good.
They're
Because
staffers from the Lynx.
She is on her own. She is like a one-man show, completely.
One-woman show. So Greta and Sheridan, this was, I believe, a statement provided to the Pat McAfee show. I don't know if she sent the statement out or if the Panda team sent the statement out to all media, but apparently this was a topic of discussion Wednesday on the Pat McAfee show because they obtained a statement from the Red Panda team, and it did detail that two staffers from the Minnesota Lynx named Greta and Sheridan stayed at Red Panda's side the entire night on Tuesday as she underwent a procedure at the hospital. So she was advised to go back home. I'm not sure where that is. And did Red Panda tell you where she lives?
I think it's the West Coast. I did ask. And then I asked what her name was, and she said it's wrong, like RONG, but people call her Crystal. So I knew that personal detail about her too. That's about it though.
All right. Well, that makes sense. Sounds like she's going to be okay. And this is great news. First of all, if you wonder why we're talking about this, like Red Panda, somebody in the comments on Wednesday had the gall to ask the question, who is Red Panda? Like if you have been to a basketball arena, an NBA arena, watched it on TV, if you've been to Nebraska games, Creighton games, whatever it might, you've seen Red Panda. Like I don't have a whole lot of patience for people who don't know who Red Panda is.
Nice. That's pretty strong. I suppose it's possible. I mean, she usually performs in the state every year. I think she took a couple years off. There was a gap there, maybe a year or two ago. But I'd say since probably, I don't know, 2012, 13, 14, we're going on 10 plus years now. She's probably been to either a Creighton game and then they do the double dip at Nebraska where she'll do the women's game one night and the men's game like the next night. She's probably done that. She's probably been here 15, 20 times. So
she is an older Asian woman who goes on a unicycle all over the basketball court, catching bowls on her head. I mean,
does any of the bowls and then puts them on her foot and then flips them on top of her head and they stack and they center perfectly. It's truly amazing.
I don't know what else more needs to be described about that. She's an icon in NBA and WNBA arenas. And it is great to hear that this fall was not her fault. So
but I'm worried. I think faulty equipment. Something is wrong. Something has gone haywire.
Yeah, there's a scandal here. So she'll be back. She's going to recover from the broken wrist. She will return to an arena near you.
Thank God. Recruiting?
Yeah. So coming tomorrow on the 4th of July, Darien Jones, the DB from Omaha North, is going to make his decision. And it doesn't seem as if there is all that much suspense left with this. Indicators in the recruiting world, as we get them, crystal balls and things like that, are pointing to the Iowa Hawkeyes. He has connections to both Iowa and Nebraska in his family because his brother Donovan plays defensive back at Nebraska and had a strong finish to his true freshman season last year. But the Jones family evidently grew up following the Hawkeyes. So the reality is that this is going to be, or this is set up to be, a disappointment on the 4th of July for Nebraska football.
Yeah, it's kind of it looks like it's going to be a sobering end to a really good week, or a really good stretch, 5 weeks really, for Nebraska in recruiting. I hope we don't have to, we're gonna do it a little bit right here, like open up the whole in-state conversation again. It's tricky and fascinating. There's numbers that Nebraska's dealing with here. That much is for sure. And I think a little bit of the blow is softened. Nebraska's, they have Jace Reynolds committed to their class right now. And that's it, right? As far as the in-state players are concerned.
Yeah. So Nebraska has,
yeah, right. So, but they haven't offered very many of the in-state players from this year. But they are going after Darien Jones, and it seems like they're probably going to get a no in that category as well. So that hurts, especially when you lose them to your biggest rival.
So they offered 3. Nebraska's offered 3 in-state players. Jace Reynolds, who you mentioned, is the linebacker from Elkhorn North. He's committed to Nebraska. Isaac Jensen, the tight end from Millard South, offered by Nebraska, went to Missouri. Just because of the nature of that position and the volume of tight ends that seem to be at Nebraska's disposal, because it's this state is so, it has produced so many of them recently. That one, while it hurts, you don't want to lose a talented guy like that. Clearly, that's the case. He's going to the SEC. You can withstand that. The Darien Jones one, I would say, is more painful because there just aren't that many DBs of his quality that come out of the state of Nebraska, and because his brother is on the roster. I don't really recall a situation where Nebraska was in pursuit like this of a sibling of a player on the roster, and it went the wrong way. You may have to go back to and I don't know, if Nebraska offered, we have to ask him if Nebraska offered Donovan Rhule out of high school in Hawaii. I mean, we're talking 25 years ago. But Donovan Rhule, of course, the brother of Dominic Rhule, who enjoyed an All-American career in Nebraska. And then Donovan went to Wisconsin. I seem to remember that Nebraska did offer Donovan, but it might have been a late offer or something to that effect. But it's that kind of situation that you're dealing with here. And Darien Jones is very much someone that is on Nebraska's level. So there are, by my count, 16 players from Nebraska high schools who are committed to FBS schools. Jones would make it 17. An incredible nine of them from Millard South, and then as we said, Nebraska's 1 for 3 with its offers. So it's a change from recent history. Let's take a break, and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about this. And then, as a result of what's gone on with this recruiting class here, with 12 commits in the fold for Nebraska as we head into the 4th of July, what might be the priorities to finish up this class over the months ahead? That's coming up next on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. All right, welcome back. Final segment of this Locked On Nebraska podcast. Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer with you. Friday, tomorrow, we will have a holiday mailbag. So reminder, please get your mailbag questions in. Send them to us on email at lockedonneb@gmail.com. We will check the comments on YouTube at the bottom of this show. You can also get them to us on Twitter by replying to any message that we post or sending us a DM at LockedOnNEB. All right, we're talking about Darien Jones, the Omaha North defensive back who's set to pick a school publicly on Friday. That would be tomorrow. and how it looks as if it's going to be Iowa. And that would make Nebraska 1 for 3 this year on in-state hits. So this is a change from recent history. Matt Rhule, in 3 classes as the Nebraska coach, 23, 24, 25 classes, has signed 22 Nebraska high school players. Of the 16 who signed in the 23 and 24 class, because we're not going to analyze the 6 who just signed in December and haven't had a chance to play a game yet. So of the 16 who signed in his first 2 years, in Rhule's first 2 years, 5 have left the program, that being Malachi Coleman, Jalen Lloyd, Danny Kalin, Isaiah McMorris, and Davon Hall. 6 are projected, in my rough projections, as part of the 2 deep to enter the 2025 season. That being Sam Sledge, Gunnar Gatula, Carter Nelson, Caleb Benning, and Tristan Alvano. Did I name 6 there? That's only 5. So it might be 5. Yeah. Okay. Does that say anything to you? Does that mean anything to you as Nebraska structures its strategy moving forward with high school prospects in the state?
Well, I don't know. It's not like I still think Nebraska needs to be active in recruiting local area prospects that they deem good enough to play in the program. With that being said, Nebraska's made the choice this time around that, they, in comparison to the guys that they are going after, that the guys don't stack up. That's kind of what they're saying without saying it directly like that and out loud, and that's okay.
Well, or that there are better prospects, that these are good players, but there's better prospects. There's better Florida.
Prospects. Yeah, the players that they are taking, the players that they were taking in their class are better than the players that are from here. That's kind of what they're saying, although in an indirect way. So that's fine. You make your evaluations and you go with what you want, but just know that it better work. Because you're going to hear about it if it doesn't. That's kind of what it all comes back to, right, Mitch? Like, they got to win games. And if you win games, and if you start beating your rivals with the local Omaha or Lincoln players, if Darien Jones goes to Iowa and in 2 years, Nebraska, or 3-4 years, Nebraska's beaten Iowa 3 or 4 straight times, this is not a conversation really at all. But it is when you don't win at a high enough level.
There is a sixth Nebraskan who's part of the projected 2 deep to enter 2025. It's ironic in this conversation that we failed to mention Donovan Jones. Donovan Jones is the sixth contender for certain to be in the rotation at corner for Nebraska this year. I think that this year in-state is a little bit of an anomaly. I don't think you'll see in the class of 27, 28 moving forward that Nebraska is going to sign one in-state player. But I also don't think that it's going to be the 7 or 8 like we saw in 2023 through 2025. I think there's a happy medium there. And if Nebraska had been able to land Jensen, and we still don't know officially on Darien Jones, but if Nebraska had gotten those 2 in addition to Jace Reynolds, like it would be somewhat normal, like especially normal in the moving closer to 105 era. That's probably what it's going to be. And some of this is going to be dependent on the depth in the class that year. Like, I don't know, last year in basketball in the state of Nebraska, where the state that has produced, I mean, just look at college basketball in recent years in the state of Nebraska. Like last year alone, you had Chucky Hepburn, Hunter Salas, John Tanji on like all conference and all America lists around the country, all players from Omaha. Like not every year is going to be like that. And last year in the sport of basketball, it just wasn't like that. So that's also going to happen in football. You're probably not going to have 9 FBS players from one school ever again, or at least in the next decade or so, coming out of Millard South. So this is a unique year in that sense. It's also unique, I think, for Nebraska to just take one. I think it'll be like on average 3, perhaps is a good place to put it at.
Yeah, case by case basis, that's for sure. And once again, if it doesn't end up If it doesn't end up in success for Nebraska, this is one of the things that you're probably going to hear about. But they have their process, and that's the way it kind of goes.
All right. And that's the way it works at every other program. Like,
Yep.
if you're at Georgia, they don't spend a lot of time stressing over how many players they signed from the state of Georgia because in that case, they're getting 5 stars from Texas and California and Oregon or wherever it might be.
Right.
Okay. So let's finish with this discussion. Regardless of what happens with Darien Jones, of the 12 commits in this class for Nebraska right now, at this moment, only 2 play defense, that being Jace Reynolds and the cornerback Danny Odom out of Orlando. Right now on the roster of 126 players, 62 play on the defensive side, 57 are on the offensive side, and then there are 7 specialists. And then of Nebraska's 19 seniors who will be out of the program a year from now when these 26s come in, 7 seniors on the offensive side, 10 on the defensive side, and 2 specialists. So all that taken into account, where does Nebraska need to focus energy as we get past July and closer to the fall in filling out the final 6 or so spots in this recruiting class? What do you think?
Yeah, sounds like defense, and you always want defensive linemen, right? Defensive linemen are like gold.
There are none in this class to date.
I've heard a lot of people refer to various positions as gold over the years. I mean, I think defensive line is probably one of those where it's absolutely true. So yeah, I would say defense, and then you could kind of mix and match from there. But I don't know. I don't know if you get like overly concerned about being off by a number or 2. It's heavy offense right now, just because you have the transfer portal as a safety net, and you don't know what the roster is going to, it just changes so much from year to year. You instead of evaluating it like 1 and 2 and 3 years out, like you may have used to been able to do, given where your numbers are, you kind of look at where things are after the off season, or certainly right now as you go into the final stretch of recruiting, and then you suss out your needs from there. But I would say defense.
No doubt Nebraska checked a major box on Monday. You talk about positions that are gold. Offensive tackle is right there at the top of the list. Nebraska quarterback, of course, and Nebraska's sitting good at quarterback with Dayton Raiola in this class, and then Trey Taylor in the next class already committed. But offensive tackle right after quarterback and defensive line, or alongside defensive line, is it. And Nebraska got Leon Noyle from New Orleans and Claude Mpuma from Chicago on the same day, this Monday. So this week is a huge success. No matter what happens at the end of the week, this week is a huge success because you landed 2 offensive tackles. You can go months and not land any offensive tackles, and you got 2 on the same day. Like, if you look at Nebraska's depth down the offensive line depth chart, I mean, there's some young tackles that are promising, and these guys will come into the program in that same situation. But like, you don't know. It's uncertain beyond what Nebraska has with Elijah Pritchett, who's a junior in the program this year. And Elijah Pritchett being a junior, like, I think what Matt Rhule, the expectation for him and the hope for Elijah Pritchett is that he plays 1 year at Nebraska and goes to the NFL. And then your other offensive tackles, I mean, senior Teddy Prohaska, who's injured, senior Turner Corcoran, who's injured. You have sophomore Gunnar Gatula. You have sophomore Brock Knudsen, and a bunch of guys who were completely unproven. Big expectations for Grant Bricks, the redshirt freshman, but he hasn't done it yet. So getting those 2 guys Monday was massive. I think defensive line will be the number 1 priority for Nebraska as it kind of resets recruiting objectives going into the football season. DB, I'm not so sure. You miss on Darien Jones. But there are 26 defensive backs on this roster. And if you only sign a couple of them in the 26 class, I don't think that's a big problem at all. In fact, I think it starts to like get things in balance somewhat.
Not the worst thing in the world. You're very heavy at that position right now. That's for sure.
Yeah. All right. Maybe a second running back. Nebraska has the one from Jamal Rhule out of Charlotte, but that is not a super deep position on the roster. So maybe that's a spot to look at too. All right. That's out there for Nebraska fans to chew on over the 4th of July. Remember, come find us on Friday for a Mailbag podcast. We'll have some fun with that, and then enjoy the holiday. Be safe, everyone out there. Thanks today for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith, he's got the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.